So two important things in my wave speech. Why closing government can't win this debate and why we win this debate. So I'll take that first and go why we win this debate. There are a lot of confusions from closing government. Firstly, the idea that this debate is supposed to be about embryos or the distinction between natural births and artificial births. I think those things are not consequential in this debate, right? This debate is about the product, like process or the acts that are carried out on the product of the process, not necessarily how the product is gotten by. So we think all of that is bullshit, right? All of the medically brewed analysis Temi tries to give you is out of this debate. Like, we don't need all of that information like Kumbi tells you, right? The two only sensible things you get from closing government. Firstly, on the issue of consent, and secondly, on the issue of resources, right, about the alternatives. Let's tell you why that still doesn't stand. The point of consent, like Izzy clearly tells you, is not at the point of the donation, right? Because sperm banks exist in the status quo. People willingly go to these sperm banks and give sperms when they think they don't need them in their seminal vesicle. Like, these are the things that happen in status quo, right? Consent is existent upon what happens to that kid, right, or to the baby. So to the point in which we show you that these babies, whether artificially made or naturally made, have full moral status, right, and should access these moral ascriptions and moral statuses. We think all of the issue of consent they give to us doesn't stand. The final thing that makes sense from closing government is this idea of resource allocation, right? About the fact that the current status quo, donations are not enough for the necessities, right? We think they mix up on two things, right? Firstly, resource acquisition needs to be on both a quantitative and a qualitative approach. So we tell you, like Izzy tells you, that there is never a world in which resources will ever be enough. So quantitatively, they fall out. Now on qualitatively, right, we tell you that the process is lacking in quality, right? So they lose out on both the approach of quality and quantity. So their whole idea of resource allocation really doesn't stand in this debate. All they give to you is blabbings, right? Like, really, really sad. Panel, why do we win over opening? This debate is primarily about two things, right? The categorical act, that is the process, and the consequence, the utility we get from it. So the first basic principle that we give to you, which we expected to be principle in this debate, is the idea of life as a means to an end. We think that life, once created, irrespective of the method of creation, should access full moral status and access to all rights. We reject these huge violations of these rights, firstly, and most importantly, how these babies do not consent to this. Like I've said all of this already. Value of life is crucial, irrespective of if life is not taken. What these guys tell you is they can kill for life. We think killing is premised on one state principle, the fact that that life poses a threat to statehood. So we need a government to tell us to what extent the lives of these babies actually pose threat to the state. We think these lives should be valued, and hence their whole idea of killing for one is bullshit. The next crucial extension we give to you from closing opposition, right, is that this narrative breeds other harmful narrative. OO tells you that, but what are the narratives that could be bred? Like, this is what we tell you from closing. We tell you that firstly, the world is already on a global movement away from narratives that use humans as means to an end. That is why there is a huge abolishment on acts like confiscating kids to keep them for weapons of warfare in the future, right? Places like Holiday in the UK have been abolished, and rights like the UN Charter have holistically kicked against this sort of acts. So when you create this narrative, like you even ask the POI, that does your narrative also appreciate child trafficking that could, provide aesthetics values of people that want babies, because that in itself is a utility and a happiness. But still, the process is problematic, right? It is default of all of the principles. It is devoid, right, of all of the principles that we preach for, and we do not stand for it, right? The next thing that we need to engage is the alternatives. Kumbi tells you that there are alternatives. What are the alternatives? That is what we answer from closing opposition. This is really, really crucial. The first alternative we tell you is that there is in the status quo stem cell donations from people who either have, like people who have two kidneys and think they can give up one kidney for the process of global medical advancements, right? Or people who are at tipping points of their lives who have healthy organs that they won't necessarily use in their deaths. These are really, really crucial. But to another really, really crucial alternative is the idea of nanotechnology. Like, I wonder how nobody engages in this entire debate. The fact that stem cells can still be regenerated even in a faster numerical process through nanotechnology, as opposed to the test tubing method that these guys give you from closing government. We think it is bullshit. It shouldn't stand in this debate. Fourth extensive matter that runs in the bench and why we win it from closing opposition, right? This idea of capitalistic exploitation of the system. What opening up tells you, principally, is that access is not going to be generic, right? That the poor will be excluded from the system. Credit opening up for that. But to the extent in which Eze tells you, right, that this principle creates a narrative with which capital can buy human life, right? With which capital can then accrue the ownership of another life. We think that principle is a more important principle in today's debate, right? And how that principle is hugely problematic to the extent in which it then affects the lives of these people, right? And how they acclimatize in society. So to the extent in which I am a billionaire and I have humongous wealth to sponsor this sort of researches, right? I can then live indiscriminate lives because I know that, at some point, if my kidney fails, I have some babies in some house somewhere that can donate kidneys to me. We think this is hugely faulty. Yeah.
Okay, so see, this is different from child shoes and child training. Since babies whose stem cells are removed have a higher chance of a better life than people who even do a major organ operation or are still waiting for organ banks which don't really work.
We think the whole idea about access to life or value of life is really arbitrary, right? Like, how do you determine if these kids after these operations will not even be bananas? We think that is something that we don't have conclusive information to in this debate. So that POI really even kills you guys the more. Final point of stasis in this debate: the idea of rationality and to what extent government can be a rational actor. Eze tells you explicitly, right, that we do not think capital in and of itself is intrinsically harmful, right? But the state as a rational actor, right, and the guardian of rationality within status quo needs to enact policies that places caps, right, on the access that capital can accrue. So to the extent in which the state allows this kind of policy to fly, the state does two things, right? Firstly, it falls on the premise of rationality because it is promulgating irrational acts. And that in and of itself puts the state in a worse off, reputational position as it would want to be, right? But secondly, the fact that the state in and of itself, right, the society in and of itself, now becomes a borderless society in which principles that are hugely problematic, like using life as a means to an end, begins to fly within status quo. We think it is hugely problematic. Panel, UP isn't against onward movement of medical advancements, right? We think this is hugely beneficial and the utility is humongous. What we are holistically against is the act. On the categorical perspective about the act, we win. On the consequences of the act, the consequentials, we also win. All that these guys give you are harms. We're very proud to oppose.